Well, good morning. When I hear my introduction, I'm almost sure I'm at my funeral because everybody is saying all these nice things about me, and I still have work to do. Some of you are much younger in age than me, and you're probably wondering, how old is this guy if he's done all that stuff? Well, this past January, I just celebrated the 41st anniversary of my 20th birthday. So if you're mathematically challenged, I'm 61. But my journey to the world has two beginnings. Maybe we'll start with the one closer to you. I was in the third batch of students at IMT Ghaziabad when it was a non-entity, when nobody knew what it was. It was in the middle of a field. Ghaziabad had no flyovers, and there was many a time we were stuck at the railway track. And me and my friends used to take a bet while we were stuck at the railway track. This was not a bet on how to change the world. It was not a bet on how to impact society or make a contribution to humanity. It was a bet on how many boiled eggs we could eat before the train came. And I think I had the record. I ate 48, and I've hated boiled eggs ever since. The other journey began in Visakhapatnam. My mother was a child bride, married to Pop when she was just shy of 15, brother at 17, me at 20, and 8th grade education. That was my mama. My father studied under a streetlight to graduate from college because his parents couldn't afford electricity. Now, the reason I'm sharing this is not to give you some kind of a hardship violin moment. It is to tell you that your story and my story unite in the very fundamentals of our origin. Humanity has a purpose for achievement, and the purpose has a couple of steps which we'll navigate through. And the agenda is, I think I speak for about an hour and 15 or 20 minutes, and then we'll try to engage in some conversation. But my plan is, when I'm done, I'm going to give enough time to stand right here so you can come to me. I don't want to be the kind of person who speaks and runs. I'm not that important. Other journey began in Vizag. I was a below average student, outstanding, always standing outside the class. I was always in that half of the class that made the top half possible. My father and mother always seemed to like other kids, much like your parents. They would always tell me, why can't you be like those kids? My mother had a different set of kids she liked. My father had a different set of kids he liked. Even though they were married, they couldn't agree on which kids they liked besides their own. I would always wonder why my parents didn't split up, go have those kids and leave me alone. Now, the reason I share that is I had a teacher. Her name was Mrs. Simon. As early as the 7th and 8th grade, she said, you have a prolific vocabulary for your age. You have a mastery over the English language, the ability to narrate Victorian literature, the ability to recite Elizabethan poetry. I don't know what this language will do for you, but I know you struggle in other subjects, but you seem to have a mastery in mind. I just pray that the good God of all creation will endow you, that this gift will bless you. That lady's promise and prayer and belief has led this itinerant, underperforming person to now speak in 75 countries on 6 continents. I have shared the stage with 2 United States presidents. I have traveled the length and breadth of this world, but nothing gave me greater joy than last year to finally have the financial wherewithal to institute a scholarship called the Mrs. Simon Scholarship in the school that her daughter is the principal of. So as you leave the formidable halls of this august institution and begin to embark on a journey that will take you of transformation to far parts of the world, always ask yourself, who is the 1, 2, or 3 people who impacted you in such a way that beneath all the layers of doubt and disbelief, they ignited a small spark of hope. William Blake, the poet, said, This eye's dim windows of the soul distorts the heavens from pole to pole and goads us to believe a lie when we see with and not through the eye. We were supposed to see through the eye with a conscience, not with the eye devoid of one. There are 8.25 billion people on planet Earth right now, and there's not another just like you. Unique in every attribute of creation, there is only one you with your eyebrows, your cheekbone, your hair, your DNA. Creation broke its mold when you were delivered. You were designed for accomplishment, engineered for success, and endowed with the seeds of greatness. Don't just go through life being a wandering generality, wondering. Try to become a meaningful specific, because that's how you were designed. Give me permission to narrate a poem for you, and then I'll give you the mood of the lecture that we had planned. When God wants to drill a man and thrill a man and skill a man, when God wants to mold a man to play the noblest part, when he yearns with all his heart to create so great and bold a man that all the world shall be amazed, watch his wonders, watch his ways, how he ruthlessly perfects whom he royally elects, how he hammers him and hurts him and with mighty blows converts him into trial shapes of clay that only God understands. While his tortured heart is crying, he lifts beseeching hands, how he bends but never breaks when his good he undertakes, how he uses whom he chooses and with every purpose fuses him to let the splendor out. God already knew what you were about. The promise and the premise. Now, I grew up in Andhra, as my intro said. Now, in Andhra, they have a rule. If you have two boys in the house, one is going to become a doctor. Apparently, this is decided before they are born. If you have a second boy, he's going to become an engineer. And the reason was not so that the parents would have the prolific prowess of proud moments of bragging rights in boring country clubs. It was because it was apparently the birthright. But I found out later that they were lying. If you do an MBBS and come back home, you get 2 acres of coconut plantation in marriage. If you do an engineering degree and come back home, they give you only 1 acre. If, like me, you do an MBA, they ask you to bring the coconut and work in the plantation. So needless to say, I was not very well thought of. My dad forced me to go to medical school and all of that other stuff. It didn't work out. I flunked out. I achieved my purpose in Ghaziabad. On the 25th anniversary of IMT, when I was invited as part of the Distinguished Lecture Series, a young student, much like you, raised his hand and said, "Mr. Dhanam, I marvel at how your life has transformed. When you were in IMT, what did you major in?" I said, "The future Mrs. Dhanam." That's a fact. I went for a degree, I ended up with a wife, and now we've been together for 37 years. I'm going to give you a plan in the architecture for discipline, but let me use the word architecture as Father George took me around the campus. I saw construction. I saw evidence of future construction. I saw plans for even more construction. If you go to the very top of the block across and you look, you'll see construction all around. So if I took an architect of any repute and brought him to any one of these numerous holes in the ground in the greater metropolitan area and said, "Hey, there's going to be construction here. Look at this hole. How tall is the building you think will fit in this hole?" With considerable certainty, the architect will tell me how tall the building is going to be. So the question is, on what is he staking his reputation? On what is he gauging his expertise? Obviously, the foundation. Henry David Thoreau said, all of us want to build castles in the air. None of us want to build a foundation on the ground. The foundation will determine when you fall, not if. When you fall, how far you'll fall. If the foundation is solid, you can ascend. Watch me carefully. When your foundation is good and you try something you've never tried before and you fall flat on your face, you break even because you had a rock-solid foundation that is unshakable. What is your foundation? John Maxwell, leadership luminary, who wrote the book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, called a solid foundation the law of the inner circle. Who is in your inner circle? My inner circle has my parents and my in-laws, my bride and my son, my best friend. If you don't fit into that category, I do not give you permission to criticize me. Now, You can critique me, but when you critique me and you're not in my inner circle, all I do is give you permission to refuse my skill. When you refuse my skill, you actually give me permission to go learn a new skill. So the people who criticize me are only allowed to criticize me at skill level. The people who love me are allowed to criticize me at the will level. There are two kinds of critics in your world: constructive critics and destructive critics. The constructive critics want you to eliminate the faults in your life so you will soar. The destructive critics just want to point out the faults in your life. Have you ever noticed some people will brighten up the whole room by leaving it? You've also noticed that a narrow mind and a fat head usually come on the same body. And some people are so narrow-minded they look through a keyhole with both eyes. This is the world we live in. 97% of the people in this world operate in the comfort zone. 3% of the people in this world operate in the effective zone. The difference between comfort and effectiveness is called growth. Growth is uncomfortable. Some of you may have watched my YouTube clips and seen me do this demonstration. If you have, play along. If you haven't, play along. Just raise your right hand for me like this. This is the universal symbol. Raise your right hand for me like this. Everybody, right hand. Now slowly put it on your chin. For those of you who missed, the chin is this pointed thing at the end of the face. And you're in one of the most prestigious universities, or deemed to be universities. August campus, beautiful buildings, manicured lawns, absolutely fabulous facilities. You're going to change the world and you don't know your cheek from your chin. Now, that's not a knock on you. I've done this all over the world for 30 years and people still repeat it even though they saw me do it last year. You know why? As humanity, we are conditioned as creatures to react to that which we see instead of respond to that which you believe. Reaction is based on societal possibles. Response is based on God-given permissibles. Once you understand that there is a fundamental difference, that you're not put on earth to compete, you're put on earth to complete. The difference between competition and completion is one letter in the English language, L, and that could be a huge loss. We go through life trying to compete with others and quickly realize that they had a different set of skills. They had a different background. They had a different upbringing. They had different opportunity. No, you cannot compete with anybody. The only person you can compete with is yourself. Yesterday ended with last night. Today is the first day of the rest of your life. Karl Barth said none of us can go back and make a brand new beginning, but all of us can start now and make a fantastic ending. Someone asked me, Mr. Dhanam, what do you want said at your funeral? I want the preacher to say, I think he's still moving. Because I have things to do. I'm not ready to check out yet. But if you came to my funeral, you would hear these words: proud husband, loving father. That was a blessing. Everything else was a choice. Eric Hoffer said, in times of change, it is the learners who will inherit the earth, while the learned will find themselves beautifully equipped for a world that no longer exists. What are the choices in your life? What are the chances in your life? But what are the blessings in your life that are non-negotiable? Hans Selye, the great stress specialist, said gratitude is the healthiest of all human emotions. Anger, the most destructive. So level one, preparation is vital. If you want a 4-point plan, my 4-point formula for my architecture of discipline, architecture of success, is just the word plan. The P stands for preparation is vital. Now you're looking at someone who can tell you without any fear of error that for the last 32 years on average, I have read on average at least one book every week. Now you're saying, well, what do you mean on average? Well, I had ADD before it was cool. So I can't read a book cover to cover. I'd go nuts. But I read 4 or 5 different books at any given time as long as it keeps my interest. But I'm disciplined. I wake up every day within 15 minutes of 4:30, did so today. I read for about a half hour, I write for about 15 or 20 minutes. Then if time permits, I go back to sleep for about an hour. While most of you have slept on yesterday's last input, I'm waking up on input I put in 45 minutes ago. It's not even a fair fight. What is the difference? Comfort and effectiveness. Sybil Stanton wrote a book called The 25-Hour Woman. In that, she said, discipline is not on your back, needling you with imperatives. It's at your side, encouraging you with incentives. To which I'd like to add, the day you make yourself a slave to discipline, the world will become your oyster. Variety is the spice of life, but it's monotony that buys the groceries. Maybe today, for the first time in your life, on your way home, or maybe at home, around the dinner table, look at the loved ones who have sacrificed blood, toil, sweat, and tears to pay the tuition so that you can be in such fancy facilities. Ask them a question. Can you tell me something about when I was born? What were your hopes and dreams for me? Did I fulfill some? Did I disappoint some? Have a dialogue. You know, all your parents want to do is talk to you. But you're at that age where communication with you guys is like talking to wood. And I'm not joking. There's a level called frivolous communication. I raised a teenager. I know what it's about. Teenage communication is like this. Where are you going? Nowhere. I don't know how many Star Wars movies you've seen that you actually think in a time and space continuum, there is a place called nowhere. No, if you're here and you move here, you're there. It's not nowhere. Who are you going with? No one. It gets better. What you're doing? Nothing. Now, these are grown people who are educated, and this is the level of their communication. Where you going? Nowhere. What you doing? Nothing. Who you going with? No one. When you coming back? Don't know. And then you have the audacity to look at your parents and say, can I have 100 rupees? And that's when your father and mother go absolutely ballistic and say, let me get this straight. You want to go nowhere with no one to do nothing and not know when you're coming back, but you want to give me the grand privilege of financing this excursion. What do you think I am, the government? That's not how this works. If you want to have a give and take, get away from frivolous communication and at least move to feeling communication. Let the IQ of your youth meet the EQ of your gratitude. And suddenly you'll realize that you don't have to get to the end of the journey to have gratitude. Having it now is better than ever before. Other people can give you pleasure, but you will never find true happiness until you learn to do something for someone else. Preparation is vital, and this preparation has a couple of things you need to do. I'm going to teach you how to glow. Learn to give more than you have. Learn to leave more than you take. Learn to offer praise to those around you. Do you realize in a room this size that there are many of your friends here who are struggling with different things and are just looking for a word of encouragement? You may have your happy clique. You may have your little social clique. I know what it's like. I was an outsider. I was a fat kid who was an underperforming student. My brother was a jock in athletics, so I didn't even have that going for me. The closest I ever came to a girl showing interest in me is when a girl patted me on the head and gave me a note to give my brother. Now here's the irony. On sports day, my brother would win all the awards and my parents could not sit down. They were clapping so much for him. And back in those days, we didn't have all psychology and all that. They just called us fat kids. They didn't have terms like muscularly enhanced or vertically challenged. No, you're short and fat. So the SEAL had a better idea. The school said, okay, we need to do something for the fat kids. Let's have a play on sports day. The worst kind of humiliation you can have is you're not in anything and they're putting you in a play. My role was the potted plant. Talk about fat. Even the role was fat. And I fainted out of stage fright with no lines because I couldn't face an audience. And then I met a hero by the name of Zig Ziglar. He said, public speaking is the #1 fear of all. Having butterflies when you speak is a sign of nervousness, but it can also be a sign of respect. Let me teach you how to make those butterflies fly in formation. Today, I make more money for one speech than I did my entire first year in America. That's how life begins to reward you if you're obedient. Give more than you have. Leave more than you take. Offer praise to the people around you. Invite them. See, if you want a mountaintop experience, don't look at the mountaintop. The food you eat on the mountaintop only grows in the valley. Nothing grows on the mountaintop. Look back to where you came from the origins of your beginning, from the villages of your parents, from the small hamlets of your generational upbringing. Bring enough people from where they are to where you are, and on their shoulders, they'll take you to the goalpost of life. That philosophy has, will, and always does work. Go back and ask yourself, what defines you? Now you're saying, I'm only in college. You're asking me to change the world. Well, change in this world requires no age. Matty Stepanek was 7 when he found out that he had an advanced case of muscular dystrophy. And he knew that by the age of 14, he would check out from planet Earth. Between the age of 7 and the age of 14, the boy wonder who did die wrote 7 books on award-winning poetry that have been inspiring generations. Some of the greatest innovative changes came from the people. I am not one of those people to even for a hint say there's anything wrong with your generation. Yours is always going to be the greatest generation. The generation that exists is always the greatest generation because they produce the greatest innovation. You are never going to be 100% of the problem, but you are always going to be 100% of the future. People say, why are you nice to children? Because they decide which nursing home I go to. It's just practical. I need to be right about that side. But one thing I want to do is apologize to your generation from mine. The world we inhabited was happy, was joyous, had gratitude, minimal opportunity, but it had love. We didn't step on each other's throats to get to where we were. We tried to help each other out. My generation left your generation greedy, hungry, desperate, despondent. You live in a high-tech world, and somehow my generation has not convinced you to never abandon high touch. I've made this statement throughout this trip in India, and many people came up to me afterwards and sent me messages on LinkedIn as well, saying that statement touched my heart. See, you can swipe, you can like, you can appreciate, you can emoji, you can take 24 different selfies till you decide one is good enough for social media. But when you're on the quietness of the pillow at night and you put your head and the day has now receded, you're awaiting another sun, hoping it'll be brighter. The tears are never digital. And suddenly this stranger who you did not know 15 minutes ago connected with every heart here. You know exactly what I'm saying. You call it a smartphone. How many of you ever used it to make a call? When's the last time you made a call? We text. My dad is a gadget guru. He's 90. I mean, he'll walk into a room, Alexa, play Jagjit, and it starts playing, you know? But planning, preparation, what is your daily routine? What is your ritual? What is your non-negotiable? My non-negotiables on a personal note. The first voice I have to hear every morning is that voice of that pretty bride of mine. The last voice I have to hear every night is her voice. I'm an itinerant. I spend 120 nights a year in a hotel room. I maintain that clip for 30 years. When I go back to the US, I'll turn around and go to South Africa to speak at a conference. And I go to the Middle East. I come back to India in November. I'm always on the go. But I'm never not on the grow. When I landed at 1:30 into the Delhi airport or got to my hotel, it was about 1:30 a.m. Saturday night. I'd done a full day seminar in Chennai. There was a voice message from my bride. She said, sweetheart, I know you can't sleep without hearing my voice, but I know it's late and you need to get some rest. You have to speak tomorrow. Good night. I love you. That's all. It doesn't take a lot. Now, what I'm not saying to you guys is call my wife. Find your own. Okay? Find your own and decide your own problems. I got my own, all right? So preparation is vital. The L in the formula stands for learning is critical. Learning is critical. Don't just sit there to get there. If you have a 20-minute commute, a 30-minute commute, a 40-minute commute, you're in a bus, you're in a metro, you're in an auto, you're in a cab, you're in an Ola, you're in an Uber, whatever it is, sit there to arrive more informed. If you're on your way home, listen to information that will allow that side. See, for 8 hours of the day, we always have to practice the skill that allows us to eventually make a living. That's your education. That's your career. But for the balance of the 16 hours, we have to invest in the will that allows us to shape a life. When skill and will come together in one cataclysmic moment for the first time on God's green earth, you will have unleashed a 24-hour champion. Don't just sit there to get there. Sit there to arrive more informed. Your competition is getting keener. Are you? Right now, throughout the world, there are people getting ready for the next phase of life just like you. What separates you? Let me give you an illustration. If you've ever helped your family go do groceries or you've done them yourselves, you'll get the gist of this. Imagine you're in a produce store, one of those mini marts or mega marts, and you're buying vegetables, and you stop by lettuce, cabbage. Yeah, you stop by a head of cabbage. Watch anybody buy a head of cabbage. They'll pick up the first one and look at it in all of its sartorial splendor. They'll watch it glisten against the sun and admire its natural beauty and put it back. Then they'll take the second one up. They'll squeeze it, thump it, bump it, echo it, bounce it, and put it back. The third one makes it into the basket without any scrutiny. You can go through life being the third head of lettuce. Someone will pick you. But it takes considerable genius to be lettuce head 1 and 2. How do you get noticed? The world you're arriving in does not remember normal. Like when I meet people, people will say good morning to me. I don't say good morning or one of those groans. Better yet, how you doing? Fine, under the circumstances. I've never met anybody in all my travels who's over the circumstances. Everybody's under them. I don't know what they're doing under there to begin with. Our response indicates next action. Someone will say, how was your weekend? Man, you're not going to believe what my landlady did. The other person will say, oh, you too? Now you have two people with two problems singing, Kumbaya, my Lord. No solution. That is practicing sympathy. Learning and sympathy never go hand in hand. It always leads to a diminishing return, and knowledge does not advance. In the world you live in, knowledge is learned, wisdom is lived. We got more knowledge right now than at any other time in human history. Largest percentage of educated people messing up the planet. What we need is wisdom, which is the correct use of knowledge. If someone says, hey, I had a bad week, I know how you feel. I remember one time when I was in the dumps, here's what I found. Bring them to your side. Practice empathy, not sympathy. Learning that negates itself is why we find ourselves in the doldrums, because we don't want to advance anything. Plus, one of the things that I find fascinating is when you see stupid behavior, stop it. Prevent someone else with the agony of experiencing that same moronic behavior after you leave. Now you're saying, what does that mean? Well, sometimes I'm standing in a movie theater and people will come up to me, came to see the movie? No, just to watch the trailers. Of course I came to see the movie. What are you, the last of the communication giants? Or they meet me in the airport going somewhere? No, just seeing takeoff and landing. My wife is not immune from this. Sometimes she'll ask me all ridiculous questions. Now, as a guy, I can say this because when a woman says, fine, stop the presses, nothing, everything is wrong. Apparently, they speak in code. My wife will come to me and say, sweetheart, she walked into the garage and I was looking and it had a flat tire. She said, did the tire go flat? No, the other three just swelled up. Of course it's flat. Or I walk in and I'm soaking wet. Is it raining? No, I took the fish for a walk. Of course it's raining. This is, it just baffles my mind. Or better yet, some of you are married in the front row, but some of you aren't. But I'll come down dressed like this. And she'll say, are you wearing that? No, it's just trial. I want to see whether you're irritated. Now I'll go back. This was dress rehearsal. Sometimes she'll say, why are you wearing that? Well, it was in fashion when you started getting ready. It went out of fashion by the time you got ready. I'll go and find something that's more fashionable. Communication fascinates me. But I stop it. Anytime I see stupidity, I'll stop it. I was in the Hyderabad airport. many years ago when Jet Airways was still flying. And I'm standing with my US luggage, so it's probably more than I need. And I got a card. There's a guy who's behind me. I'm the last in line. And I don't know if you watch this obnoxiousness that you'll see primarily in India, the land that produces more scientific and engineering people than any other place on the planet. A line is never straight. These guys will do quantitative algorithms to put people on the moon, but they don't know how to stand in a straight line. And then this other time and warp. You're standing at the window, the guy will come and put his head next to you. You wish he had some deodorant, but apparently he missed that class on hygiene. He's a little too close to you. And you look at him and say, excuse me, I got the window. I also hear. What do you mean you also hear? It's bad grammar to start with and more stupidity to engage in that. Get away. Well, this guy, I'm standing at the back of the line, he pulls up and he's got his phone to his ear. And anytime a person wants to be obnoxious, watch their face. They will never make eye contact. They'll look to the heaven. He looks to the heaven and he sees a friend of his in front. Now remember, I'm last in line. He's looking to the heaven and asking the friend, "Main wahan aa jaun?" Friend said, "Aa jao." "Ab baap ka raaj hai kya? What do you mean, aa jao? Main khada hoon, bada banda yahan pe. What do you mean, aa jao?" So I looked at him and I said, "Excuse me, sir, let me give you line etiquette. In this line, I'm the king. Badshah hoon main. I'm last. Any advancement takes place through me. You ask me, then you ask her, then you ask him. You ask enough people, you'll find to the front of the line, you'll be with your friend. I'll give you that permission. I'll stand here only." The Jet Airways guy is so impressed with how I handled the situation. He says, "Come, sir, I'll check you in the business class." So as I'm leaving the line, I look at him. I said, "Congratulations, ab is line ka badshah aap ban gaye." So, and I walked away. The reason I say that is, that person did not decide to be rude, crude, mean, or nasty when he arrived at the airport. Somewhere along the line, he believed that behavior was okay. Anytime you see something that is unorthodox, don't take it personally. Someone kicked their clat a long time before they got to you. And that's what motivation is. Motivation is a motive for action. Whose motive is it? I do not let things in my day get in the way of the opportunity for what life brings. There is grand beauty in what we get to experience. This celestial ball hung here in all of the multiverses that have been discovered astronomically is the only one perfectly designed for life and relationships and forgiveness and love and humility and respect and dignity. The attributes of good living. Happiness depends on happenings. But joy is undiluted, it's unadulterated, it's pure. Now, I'm not saying go around grinning from ear to ear like you've eaten a banana sideways. That's insanity. But at least a little pep to your step, a little bounce to your ounce. Quit looking like the picture on your ID. Most of us, when someone says, "Do you have family picture?" we don't produce the Aadhaar card. That's the ugliest picture we got of ourselves. Because that day we were the most terrified when they took a picture of us. You produce one of your selfies. Learning is critical. What are you learning to engage? Not academic. My mentor never went to college. When I came back to India and told my dad that I had met a man named Zig Ziglar, my dad first thought that was a sewing machine attachment. He said, "Wo bhi asli naam hai kya?" I went, "What is this?" I said, "No, he's a motivational speaker." He must be motivated to have a name that starts and ends with Z. My dad is, of course, primarily negative. And then he was born in India. So that just manifests in magnitude. One day in a seminar like this, at the age of 75, after my father came to grips that I was actually changing lives, I had young people come to my seminar on the verge of quitting life and said, "You sparked hope in me. I have led people away from addictions. I'm not trained in any of this. I just give hope. Hope is the foundational quality of all change," said Alfred Adler, the great psychologist. John Maxwell said, "If there's hope in the present, there's power in the future." My father stood up in a seminar like this. He was 75 years of age. He said, "Is there hope for me?" I said, "What's the real question, Pop?" He said, "After a BSc degree, I had to go serve my family. I became a lower division clerk at the municipality. Then when they were building the refinery, they said my qualifications would allow me to get a shift foreman job. Through learning on my own, I became the chairman and managing director of 2 companies. But I have always regretted the fact that I never finished my education. I said, let's go back. He said, what do you mean? I said, you're 75, you have a degree. The university that you went to is still operational. Let's ask. Here's the principle, which I shared with you. If you ask for something you've never had and they don't get it, you break even. So we went and asked. They said, yeah, if you take an entrance test, we'll give you a seat in the MA program. He took an entrance test, he aced it. He got a provisional seat in the MA program, 6 months distance, 6 months on campus. He would drive his little car with a sandwich that Amma would pack and a small bowl of soup in the same canteen that he used to carry when he was a shift foreman all those years ago. And he began his MA. Dad graduated his MA with the first division result at the age of 77. At the age of 79, he petitioned the university with a 50-page dossier. He said, I want a seat on your PhD program. They said, you're nuts. My father said, why would you not give me a seat on the CAT program? He said, you're 79. My father said, so? You'll be 82 by the time you finish. He said, how old will I be if I didn't finish? Still be 82. That's not a disqualifier. Well, we can't give you a program. You're not going to do anything with it. The 50-page dossier was my father's journey from that streetlight to an employer of thousands of people, to a man who served in multiple countries. He said, if anybody in this town deserves a seat at this university, my son is an engineering graduate from this university. My other son finished his undergraduate from this university. My wife did her BCom from this university. If anybody in this town deserves a seat on the PhD program, I do. At the age of 79, they gave my dad a provisional seat on the PhD program under special provision from the vice chancellor. At the age of 82, my father got his PhD. The same year, my mother graduated and got her MA. Both my father and mother walked across the convocation at the same university getting their advanced degrees. Today, my father will be 90 in January. When I met him last week, I said, Pop, what are your goals? He said, son, ever since you've started inspiring me, I listen to you every morning, and I know till the day I die. This is the statement I gave my father: when your obligations to others finish, your obligations to your dreams remain. Now my father has just submitted a special project to the University of Hanoi in Vietnam for postdoctoral research on the subject of determinism, and he has to produce a 150-page thesis by June of next year. This man reads 3 hours a day. I have been very privileged in this my life's journey to be one of the few people on planet Earth to at the same time have bought my father and my son textbooks. I'm not giving you advice that I haven't shared with my own family. I'm not telling you to do something we don't do day in, day out. Life is tough. But if you're tough on yourself, life becomes infinitely easier on you. First, preparation is vital. Second, learning is crucial. The A in the formula stands for adaptability is integral. You have to learn how to prepare yourself for a global world, not just a virtual world. Don't just think, where do I get a job? JOB stands for just over broke. Adaptability means you have to realize in this new post-COVID world that the streams of your imagination the streams of your income should only be exceeded by the streams of your imagination. Don't just try to get just one avenue. Try to pursue multiple avenues. Give one or the other more credence. So when I began and understood this principle, I said, okay, maybe I'll finally start writing. Now, writing is easy. The writing is always ready. The writer may not be. So when I started writing, it was just whatever. Every morning I would write something which I thought was sheer brilliance, but nobody wanted it published. In fact, I remember sending my first manuscript out, and it came back untouched. And I'm giving you authorial dramatization. This is not what they said, but it sounded like this. Dear Mr. Dhanam, we have read the drivel you have produced with considerable disgust. Not only have we ever seen such garbage put on paper, we recommend you stop writing, but we also recommend you stop reading. Rejection, if you take it personally, you're allowing them into your inner circle. What did they say? The writing is ready, the writer isn't. Rejected second time, third time. Then someone gave me the story of Norman Vincent Peale, The Power of Positive Thinking. Dr. Peale was a preacher at a church in New York and wanted to bring positive thinking into the human lexicon. So he wrote a book, The Power of Positive Thinking, and everybody said, this is America, post-World War II, the industries are just cranking back up. Nobody wants just feel good. 17 different rejections. He finally got disgusted. He took the entire manuscript and threw it in the dustbin. And he told his wife, Ruth Peale, who started Guidepost magazine, he says, as your husband, I forbid you to touch that. We are done with this book writing nonsense. I'll go back to preaching. Just throw that manuscript away. But knowing how hard her husband worked on it and wanting to be obedient to her husband, she put the entire trash can in a brown paper bag and took it to publisher number 18. The result was publishing history. That book has sold over, I think, let's say 150 million copies, probably worldwide, every language known to man. What is that desire in you that others are saying cannot be done? Eleanor Roosevelt said, other people can tell you what you can or cannot be, only you can fulfill it. After rejection number 5, I was desperate. And I went to Mr. Ziegler and I said, I don't think writing is in me anymore. I'm going to quit this. He said, well, have you considered an editor? See, this is what he meant by constructive critic. A constructive critic means an editor who will look at your work and say, I believe in you, but I know what writing is. Let me take a crack at your manuscript. I had sent her 400 pages, and what she sent back looked like a Shakespearean tragedy. There was so much red on it, I didn't recognize any of my original writing. But she says, sweetheart, I have taken away all the pages that are not a book. See, many years later, I was speaking to the Native American community in the US, and one of those guys said, success in the Native American, what we call the Red Indian, the Native American community is equivalent to start building a canoe. How do you build a canoe? You start with a tree and remove all parts that's not a canoe. So when she took 400 pages of pure stuff and gave it back to me, 162 pages was my first book that became a bestseller, The American Dream from an Indian Heart. Was published by McGraw-Hill in India. In India, many people bought the book because they thought it's a book on how to get to America, but that was a whole different reason. But it still made me a lot of money. But the joy this wayward child has, when as an underperformer in that town, I had to run away to make my fame and fortune, that when I'd call my mother and say, where's Dad? Oh, he's just, you know where he is? He's at the bookstore next to the section that has your book, standing there every evening saying, that's my boy. That's my boy. It will come full circle. You can love a little, you can laugh a little, you can cry a little, but the universe does not suffocate because you hold your breath. Life is not a spectator sport. In fact, life is like a sport. 75,000 people desperately in need of exercise, constantly yelling at 22 people desperately in need of rest. You can't win it if you're not in it. You can't stand on the sidelines and say, coulda, woulda, shoulda. You have to adapt. Success is never going to be who you are in relation sitting to the person next to you. That's competition and that's comparison. Success is who you are in relation to where you began and what you began with. Success then is always a journey, never a destination. Coming to that point is vital. And this adaptability, I had to learn it many different ways. When I first came up from the south to the north, I remember sitting in the mess in IMT Ghaziabad, and they were allotting rooms. And I had never shared a room with anybody. I had never lived outside South India. Here I am in the remote part of nowhere, in a place that nobody knows. I landed in Ghaziabad at the old bus adda. I was sharing the story in the morning when I was driving over here in the old bus station. My aunt in Delhi put me on the bus, almost in tears, saying, "Pata nahi kya hoga is banda ko." I land here with a suitcase. In those days, when you travel, your mother gave you a trunk and a hold all. Those were my two possessions. I landed at the bus adda and I had to go to the guy making mattresses there. In those days, they used to sit on the side and puff them up and make them for you right away. They rolled the mattress, put my trunk and my hold all on the rickshaw, and the rickshaw lifted up. And I walked from the old bus adda next to my luggage, next to the rickshaw, all the way to Rajnagar. That was my beginning. I remember first day of college, August 16th, 1982. I saw her standing there, most beautiful thing I'd ever seen in my life. I knew my search was over, at least for the semester, but here we are 38 years later, okay? So now, the reason I'm sharing this story is not some lovey-dovey romantic nonsense. I'm the worst at everything, including relationships. But I said, I had learned in life that if you want to fail, fail big. See, because I know something, failure is an event. It has never been a person. Throughout the history of humanity, you can fail at something. You cannot fail as someone. God loves you too much. The singer Ethel Waters was asked about the Reverend Billy Graham, says, what makes Billy so great? I love her answer, very colloquial, not religious, colloquial. She says, honey, God don't sponsor no junk. He hasn't in each of you, wonderfully, fearfully made, unique in every attribute. But when I walked up to my wife and I said, day one, think about the guts, huh? I mean, I barely made it here. I had to buy a mattress in this town. That's how much of a stranger I was here. And I walk up to the director of Ingraham's daughter. Her roll number is 2 at Ingraham Institute. And the joke goes that when her father came back from America, he started the English school so his daughter would have a school. I walk up to her and say, will you marry me? Get away from me, creep. Well, I've just got telling you that if you try something and it doesn't work, you break even. So what does that give you permission to do? Try again. So after the next day, I said, how about now? No. But then it became a joke. We started hanging around. Started having a cup of tea here and there. No relationships in those days. Of course, her sister, big kebab mein haddi, always there. I mean, she went everywhere with us. December 23rd, 1983. I'm winding up and going back south for the Christmas holidays. I used to go to her house for lunch. I tried to be there every day because they had a cook and the cook had something to cook. So it was a better place to be than the hostel. So I would just show up there. As she closed the gate between us, she said, yes. I said, yes, what? She said, yes, I'll marry you. See, I'd forgotten the question. Life happened. She said, yes, I'll marry you. I said, okay, don't be so pushy. So I share that tongue in cheek for this reason. Today, if you ask that beautiful bride of mine, why did you marry him? She does it funny. She says, the reason I married is I wanted to spare any other woman with the misery of being with him. But I'll give you the principle that came out of that about adaptability. I have a rule. I work in a very, very flourishing business. I have trained everybody from AT&T to Walmart. Like I said, my corporate credentials speak for themselves. I don't need to brag on it. I train very high-performing people. But I have a rule. I will never go out to lunch with a woman who is not my wife without the presence of anybody else. Just a rule. Now, that doesn't mean I'm some old-school fuddy-duddy or there's a long line of people waiting to pounce on me. That's not the truth. The truth is I do it to honor her. You have to have some standards. Dr. Martin Luther King said, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. So start standing for something that is small, that is controllable. G.K. Chesterton said, you can bend in many different directions, but you can stand erect on only one. The angles in life are many. The route of morality, straight. Honesty, straight. Purity, straight. Dignity, straight. So I trained a Fortune 30 company. And the lady I trained was going to be making a presentation where she was going to compete with 4 other men. Let's call her Kay. She said, Krish, will you help me with my presentation? Absolutely, this is what I do. So they pay you top dollar, you train them, and she wins the presentation because her presentation was greater than anybody else's. She beat the other 4 guys. She got a 17-day all-expense-paid trip to Australia, first class with her husband. She's flying higher than a kite. She comes back to Dallas and says, I need to take you to lunch as a reward. I said, you know my rule. She said, well, ask around. Let's see if anybody else can go. But nobody was there. And now it's still business, so I have to be practical. Remember, rules you make are not for the exception. They are the norm. You break rules only for the exception. You never break rules for the norm. You negotiate. So here's the principle in adaptability. Some days, everything in this world is given. The rules of this institution, the educational parameters of your department, the guidelines of your professors, these are all given. You can't change that. Some things are uncontrollable, act of nature, wrath of God, 9/11, G20. It'll just disrupt. But some things are negotiable. In life, you will only adapt when you know what is negotiable. So I asked around, nobody was in the office, so I called that beautiful gal and I said, sweetheart, on Thursday afternoon at 2 o'clock, I'm going out with Kay. You've met her before. Between 1:30 and 3, I'm going to be with her for lunch. And Anila laughed. She said, sweetheart, there's not a long line of women waiting to pounce on you. And then you could hear the sniffle, the quiver of the lip, as I knew what she was about to say was going to change my world again. She says, but I find it completely fascinating and utterly sweet that after almost 40 years of knowing me from those formidable days, every day you do something that may dishonor me, you always ask. Ask. That's all it is. Adaptability means being aware. That's all. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care about them. When I went and met Mrs. Simon earlier this year, 94, holding her hand, she's not cognizant of all the things I've done. But when her daughter says, Amma, he has a scholarship in our name, and the scholarship has only one category, find a kid undeserving in every attribute, a complete throwaway, who's standing on the periphery, not even believing he belongs in here, go embrace him and bring him in and give him an education in my name. And Mrs. Simon said, I wish I could share with you all the different times I saw your ads and I graded it 100 and said, I told him so. Other people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So preparation, learning, adaptability. The N stands for networking. And then what am I looking at? 10 o'clock. All right. Networking. So I'm going to give you a formula here. So far, you having fun? Okay, this is yes. This is no. And a few of you are from my home state. This is I'm schizophrenic, and so am I. All right, so I don't know what that means. They just nod their head. So WIN, wisdom, innovation, networking. Wisdom, we've already talked about. Innovation. Every day, do something for someone that they can do for themselves. But here's where I'm going to teach you a strategy at your age that will revolutionize your world. Go against the grain. Remember the Disney promise, nobody remembers normal. How are you going to be noticed? When I go to a restaurant, I'll always ask the waiter his name. Not because I'm trying to win points or get free service or a bigger scoop of ice cream. I'm asking his name because some mother gave him a name. Dale Carnegie in How to Win Friends and Influence People said, to a person, the sweetest sounding word in the whole world is their name. And yet this guy in his profession or her in her profession become the wave of a hand. I need more service here. I need my check because I'm done being served by you. Can you hurry up and serve me some more? Hey, I've been trying to get your attention. How long does someone have to wait to be served here? And he's hustling and bustling as a wave. Isi Mane gave that kid a name. When I first came back to India, of course, I was raised in an Orthodox Hindu home. I changed somewhere along the way and went a different trajectory in my faith. But my father was quite perplexed. He was still deeply rooted in the fact that there's certain people you can touch and certain you cannot. And I put my arm around this kid and I said, Beta, naam kya hai? He said, Ramesh, sir, trembling. Not only am I asking his name, I'm putting my arm around him. And suddenly the world changed for him. My father is aghast. We don't even know where he comes from. I said, Dad, he and I have something very much in common. Yeah, both of you are unemployed for any real job. No, Dad, we both were born very close to our mothers. We are both connected by being part of humanity. The blood of mankind runs in both of us. We both have the same hopes, dreams, aspirations. We all want to be happy, to be healthy, to be reasonably prosperous, to have friends, security, peace of mind, good family relationships, and hope. And he says, what difference will it make? They're still useless. I said, watch and learn, Pop. When we were on our way back to the car, I gave him a big tip, but he ran with the tip in his hand to the car behind me. I've been a waiter here for 10 years. People have tipped, people have stiffed on tip. But you're the first person who asked me my name. He's still holding the tip. Sir, I can tell you, I will remember this day as long as I live. That's all. A name. Innovation and networking mean you need to get off your high horse. Nobody cares where you came from. Let me give you an illustration. Let's say you go to the doctor's office, and there are 3 doors. Door number 1 has the doctor who's extremely qualified. Every degree that can be construed in the form of an alphabetical configuration, he has got. And you say, Doctor, how many times have you done this surgery? Well, including you, 1. What do you mean, you've never done it? No, I'm overqualified. I spent 50 years preparing for this moment, and I just can't wait to open you up and just see the wonder of the human body, because so far it's all been theory. I just can't wait to see your blood flowing and your guts strewn. You'd say, next. Well, let's say you go to the next person. Where did you go to school? Oh, I never went to school. What do you mean, you're not qualified? No, but I've operated from the bongo to the Congo to the mango. I've got so much experience. I mean, I take toes and put them in ears. I'm a miracle worker. You'd say, next. What if the next person says, hey, all I know is that you're in good hands. We're going to follow the processes that are clear. We've studied all the latest procedures. You're in the best hospital. The aftercare is going to be phenomenal. Don't be in a rush to leave because of insurance reasons. We have leeway built in. But then you ask him, did you go to school? No. Did you have experience? No. So none of those work for you. You don't want a person who's only qualified but has a bad attitude. You don't want a person who's overqualified and has no attitude. You don't want a person who is only happy but has never been to school. You want someone who has both skill and will. But when people see you for the first time, they don't know where you went to school, don't care. They don't know how many years you worked, don't care. You have literally 7 to 14 seconds to make it, break it, or fake it. After which it will take you an hour to recover it. Even the people who picked me up this morning were quite surprised when I was in the lobby before them. And I told them 7. But if I tell someone 7, I'm going to be there at 5 to 7. Here's why. One time in my life, I was late to a meeting by Mr. Ziegler. And he looked at me and he said, son, let me tell you something about time management. Now, the reason I'm stressing on time management is you live in this country where I have never seen one clock in India, either digital or analog, that has the word ish on it, but everybody uses it. What time are we meeting? 7-ish? Oh, between 8 and 9 and 10 and next Tuesday. So time and distance are kind of anomalies in India. How far is it? Or you ask him, which direction I go? Seedha jao. Are yeah, seedha jao. You get 12,000 miles, I'll be right back here. I mean, kya, which direction though? I mean, but that's us. But when Mr. Ziegler said I was selfish, it cut through my character. I said, sir, don't tell me I'm selfish. Call me lazy. When I was growing up, that was my middle name. Because my father would always say, what are you, lazy? And I thought it was my middle name. He said, no, son, when you woke up this morning, something in your gut told you your time is more valuable than whatever was going to happen. Wow. Newsflash. Ding, 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 ding. Call me lazy. I can take it as a bad character flaw. Call me lack of discipline. I'll take it as something that I'm not good at. But don't assault my character and call me selfish. I don't think I'm selfish. No, I'm selfish because I believe my time is more valuable than yours. I'm so glad we started on the dot at 9, even though we were running around. Trust me on this. If you hear nothing else I've said today, from this day forward, practice this principle, and you will network better and you will innovate greater. Here's the quantitative. For everything in this world, show up 15 minutes early. Stay 15 minutes late if you can. Spend 15 minutes less gossiping and 15 minutes less at lunch. All I'm asking you to, in the 24-hour day, find 4 15-minute blocks, and just about anybody here can do that. 15, 15, 15, 15 is 60, big whoop. 60 minutes a day is an hour. An hour a day is 5 a week. It's 20 a month. It's 250 a year. It's 6 weeks. Imagine having a 6-week edge on someone else. You don't need to do anything. You just show up and throw up with a 6-week edge and you'll be ahead of them. Read 20 minutes a day. If you read just 20 minutes a day on average, at the end of the year, you'll complete 20 books that are 200 pages in length. And that's 19 more than the average person bought after graduation. Imagine having a 19-book advantage and a 6-week advantage over everybody in humanity as qualified as you. You'll become a 3%er from a 97%er. Raise your right hand for me as high as it'll go. Now raise it a little higher. Why didn't you do that to begin with? I said as high as it'll go. We all save a little bit for a rainy day that never comes. 97% comfort zone, 3% effective. The highest on this room is literally standing on your tiptoes on the highest surface you can climb on. You're saying, wait a minute, that's a trick question. No. Why do we do that? Why did we even, when you heard the word highest, even where you're sitting, didn't reach for the highest where you were sitting? We are conditioned into passivity to believe that I cannot give this world everything because this world is selfish. I've got to save a little bit for myself. And what will happen is most people will go to their grave with their finest dreams still within them. Last question, if people ask, is what is the difference between talent and strength? Talent, I believe, is from God. Dr. Martin Luther King said God has given everybody some amount of talent, some more than others, but not left anyone without any. But strength is man manifested. Most people will go to their grave with their finest talent still within them because they hung around with the wrong men and women. Success is going to where success is and hoping by sheer centripetal force you're sucked in, which means you have to be uncomfortable if you want to become effective. One of the principles I wrote when COVID said, what was the statement that we gave? Everybody was whispering to each other, this is the new normal. New is scary, normal is average. How many of you were really motivated with scary average? This is the new normal, and everybody walked as if, some little red ball somewhere, someone ate a bat in China, and the whole world shut down. Of course, this one, I cannot understand so many things about COVID. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but if this virus was everywhere, why did they have to stick a Q-tip 6 inches up into my brain to find it? If it's everywhere, shouldn't they say, hey, it's next to you? Then you go to a restaurant, apparently the COVID is only from there to the table. When you sit down, you can take your mask off because it stops and goes back to the entrance. In the plane, you have to maintain 6 feet to board. When you get on, it's 18 inches next to you because it stays in Delhi. Its relative picks up in Chennai. A lot of this didn't make sense. I used to joke. I said, I only took off my mask to sneeze. That scared the bejeebers out of a lot of people. But when I heard the word new normal, I said, this is my greatest opportunity to do something remarkable in the next 2 years. I wrote 2 books. Here's why. I put on the wall in front of my computer, old excellence now with new opportunity. Everybody was new normal. I was not essential, which means I was relegated to my house. I called a friend of mine who has a company with whom I had a contract. None of you will do this because it's beneath you. Like I said, I called him and I said, hey, you have a contract with me. It's not about the money. Can you give me a minimum wage job with your company? Just call me a lower division clerk or whatever. Call me a sweeper. Break my contract up and send me something every week. Even if you don't send the money, it's okay. He said, what are you after, Krish? I said, I just want a certificate from your company, a W-4, and an ID card says that I'm an employee of your company because I looked in the newspaper today and the government said your company is essential services, that you can come and go as you wish. So with your card thing, I don't need to be at the house. I can go to my office. I can go to my studio. I can do real-time conversations with people in India who are hurting at midnight and give them real-time motivation because I wanted them to see, hey, you're going through change, I'm going through change, but just because I'm the expert, I don't want you waking up at midnight. I'll come at midnight. Old excellence, now with new opportunities. I remember in one of the forums, someone said, oh, Mr. Dhanam, what's the difference between doing a Zoom call at home and doing a Zoom call in the office? You have to wear pants. It's almost mandatory. Imagine being pulled over by the police. Oh, I thought I was going to the living room. That's why I'm in my underwear. No, that doesn't work. But when you wake up at 11 o'clock and splash water on your face and groom yourself a little bit and dress up and make a 15-minute voyage to somewhere else where there's nobody, suddenly the people at the other end of that reception are going to get something that is stable, that is researched, that is quality, and that is programmed. That's all. See, some of these things everything I've shared with you in the last hour and a half, or hour and 15 minutes, everything I've shared with you doesn't cost a dime. That's why you're skeptical. Your doubt is, man, I've been told that all great changes require me to go get a certificate. I have to go get some tuition for it. I've got to join a special course for it. No. Common sense is not common practice. That's all. Anything, Steve Brown from Emory University put it this way, anything worth doing is worth doing poorly until you can learn to do it well. Someone else said, by an inch, it's really a cinch. By the yard, it's really a hard. The thing I believe is you do not ever, please, don't expect the end of the process while still in the middle of the process. Learn to go as far as you can see. When you get there, you can see further. Don't bite off more than you can chew, but make sure you have small bites every day. When I started writing just for 30 minutes a day, I have always had at least 150 pages ready for the next publishing. I've done 6 books. I've collaborated for another 5 others. My 7th book is now ready. 8th book is also ready if I had to really stretch it. That's not to say that you need to read my books or I need to publish books. All I'm saying is that one day it'll be over. For some it'll end early, for some it'll end late. But when we arrive at Checkpoint Charlie, at your end game, some of you will get a 6x4 plot and some of you will be lit up. Either way. When you stand back and look at your life, and let's say as you're lying flat, they're talking about your life. Consciously or unconsciously, at the end of our journey, we can only make 2 statements. My friend Vicky Hitchcock says this, only 2 statements. I wish I had, or I'm glad I did. I wish I had is one of regret. I'm glad I did is one of possibility. Now hear me carefully. Positive thinking will not do anything, but it will do everything better than negative thinking will. That's all. I'm not saying that I don't have bad days, but I guarantee you my bad days are better than most people's good days because I know how to get out of them. You don't lament in self-pity so long. The good book said, let the weak say I am strong. When you're in doubt, network, ask other people. Right now, I think they're doing classes on it as well. Carl Menninger from the Menninger Clinic in Topeka, Kansas put it this way. He said, when you feel the weight of the world on your shoulders, when you feel overburdened by life's pressures, when you feel overwhelmed by what the world and your family expects of you, find someone else with a bigger problem than yours and lift them up. Momentarily, yours may go away, but it's in that moment of agony that you make bad decisions. And what happens is when we make a bad decision, we usually follow the bad decision with a bad action. In order to curtail those moments, you have to ask yourself very fundamental, simple things, and life becomes easier on you. Let me give you two stories, and then one is a story that most of you would resonate with, another is a personal one. So there was a young kid who was kind of discarded by society. She had grown up in the homes. She was a ward of the state. Her brother also was a ward of the state. And they kind of treated her bad at the hospital. They actually said that she was, in those days, they used the word retarded, not mentally disabled. So they said that she's not even fit for normal conversation. Put her in the cellar of the hospital. So in Boston, Massachusetts, they put her in the cellar. And she grew violent. She grew aggressive. She would lash out at people because she was almost being caged like an animal. Along came a young nurse who spelt love Time, would just sit outside and listen, would give a cookie, a glass of milk. What this girl wanted was consistency in the darkness of that dungeon and the life fleeting above. Every day she was seeing light. It's like when Mother Teresa, in her book, No Greater Love, she talks about picking up a guy on the streets of Calcutta and part of his body stays stuck to the asphalt. He says, the guy looked into her eyes and said, I have lived the life of a dog, but I'm going to die looking into the eyes of an angel. People need that familiarity. There's a slum in Delhi that I go to, and we support a small community behind there. There's a girl there that the community we support rescued. She was rescued because her father sold her to this community for the equivalent of $100 US to support a drug habit. And this group bought that girl to give her some amount of semblance of continuity. When I went back the second time, her face is caked with dirt because she'll never get out of that slum. But she pulled my little finger, big smile on her face, and Babuji, aap fir se aaye. Consistency. So this nurse was helping that girl. And one day the doctor said, wow, she's made a miraculous recovery. She's about 12. She's fit to be released. She said, where will I go? What will I do? Let me somehow work here as a volunteer. So they let her. Some years later, she joined Perkins and specialized in sign language. And then the call came from Alabama, where there was a young girl who was born both blind and, was born and then very soon, before the age of 3, developed an illness that took away her sight and her hearing. So this girl who grew up in Boston was sent down to Alabama to take care of this girl. Now, the girl from Boston knew sign language, but the girl in Alabama was blind. How do you sign to someone who's blind? The girl couldn't hear. You can sign to a person who's deaf, but you can't sign to a person who's blind. So she learned the art of signing in the palms of that girl and making her touch the object. And that was the beginning of this young girl in Alabama's learning. Many years later, when the Queen of England was giving England's highest honor to Helen Keller, the little girl from Alabama, Helen Keller said, if it wasn't for little Annie, the great Anne Sullivan, the world would have never known Helen Keller. Into the lives of people, other people will come. Greatness will always be drawn out if the pursuit of it is noble and the desire for it is honorable. Now, the flip side, amongst everything I said, you have to have a thick hide. Don't take everything seriously. One of my bosses gave me a paperweight early in my sales career, and it simply said, angels fly because they take themselves lightly. So I've always had a lightness to me. I've never taken anything seriously. In fact, when I'm done, some of you will like me. Some of you will dislike me because I'll have knocked you off balance. 4 or 5 of you will steal my jokes. That's despicable, but I can't do anything about it. Reason is, tomorrow is another group, day after is another group, and I'm just going through the motions because on Thursday I see my bride, and I always tell people, when they ask me, where are you going? I said, I'm going home. I just have to stop off in India on the way. I'm always going home. This is all part of the journey, doesn't matter. So one day I was finished a seminar for a Fortune 30 company, which means I had now arrived. Car picks me up at the airport. You get good money. You sit in the front of the plane. So I'm standing outside the airport hotel waiting for the shuttle to take me to the airport. This day it was a small hotel. I told them it's an early flight. I don't need the private car. I'll take the public transportation. They said, okay. So I'm standing in the airport, waiting out in the airport hotel. The shuttle is there. And there's a lady next to me. She looked like she had fallen asleep in a salad bar. She had a hat with all fruit in it. There was a guy standing next to her. When I noticed that the shuttle driver was running late, I just picked up my bags and put them in the van. Baggage handling is easy. You just lift. The lady looked at me. This is in America. So she looked at me, brown-skinned boy, and she thought that I worked for the hotel. So she used her nose, which doubled as a pointer, because maybe I don't understand English, and asked me to put her bags in the van, which I did. Baggage handling is easy. Servant leadership is easy. Going the extra mile is easy. So I just put her bags in the van. The guy standing next to her wants to get involved now, and he asked me to put his bags in the van, which I did. Now, there comes a point after I do a good deed, I evaluate in my mind, is this deed worthy of remuneration? So I put my hand out for a tip. The guy gave me $1. The gal gave me $1. I put the money in my pocket. When the driver came, I got into the van. Now they realized I didn't work for the hotel, that I was a fellow passenger. West Palm Beach, Florida, morning, there's only one flight that goes to Dallas. Odds are they're on my flight. Odds are when I sit down in the front, they'll be going bye-bye to the back. The guy, as soon as I got in the van, looked at me and said, I made a horrible mistake. I said, you're not getting your money back. At which point he made the story tellable and told again. And here's the principle. He said, I wish all my employees had your disposition. That's all. Everything I shared with you is disposition. Not how do you react, how do you act. How do you respond? That's vital. One time I did a session like this for a big group in Dallas, and I was wearing a tuxedo. When women dress up, you look amazing. When guys dress up, we look like waiters or like penguins out on a date. You know, all of us in tuxedos, just hating every moment of it. Especially, just watch your family go out and your father has to wear a suit that he wore on his wedding. That middle button is like a lethal weapon. He kind of inhales, and it's waiting to pop and take someone's eye out. When women say they have nothing to wear, they have nothing new to wear. When guys say they have nothing to wear, they have nothing clean to wear. So we know how that works. So I'm standing there in my tuxedo. I was the keynote speaker. I was the guest of honor, which means all these people heard me, but none of them paid attention to a thing I said. So I'm standing in front of the hotel. Anila goes to give the valet the car ticket. This guy standing next to me looks at me and says, I need a cab. And in big hotels, cabs are right there. One came. I opened the door, and I don't know why I always put my palm like this when I help people. He put $1, I put it in my pocket. Another guy comes and says, I need one too. Now the hotel guy is saying, what are you doing? I said, well, doing your job. Obviously, you're not good enough at it. Meanwhile, Anila comes and says, what are you doing? I said, if you're quiet, I think I can get a good dinner out of this. Here's why. One of these days, you will be known for your deeds. The question is, do you leave an inheritance or leave a legacy? Everything I shared with you allows you to leave a legacy. And I'll end. I was told to end at 10:30, so I'll give the last story. When my mother died, the hardest moments in my life, I was very close to my mom. I was in Bangkok when my father said, I don't think she's coming out of the hospital. Can you come back? So I made it back. I got to the ICU that night, and I remember my mother was fair by South Indian standards, and she was poked and prodded, and I just didn't want to see her hurting anymore. And in Telugu, my mother looked at me and said, Alispoyandra, I'm tired. I said, go. And when my dad came to the hospital the next morning, I said, Amma is not going to come out. And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, I gave her permission last night, Dad. No one should suffer like that. So when my mother died, I was kind of distraught, but there was a side of me that was also relieved that she was not hurting anymore. But then when I went home, the scene surprised me. I didn't expect that many people in the house that my father deeded to me. All my cousins had taken over the house because apparently now they're going to be 10 days of mourning, and we have to feed all these people who never said a good word to my mother. They're all crying there, but they don't cry for free. Apparently you have to feed them. And you have to feed them quite a bit, because apparently these guys eat more during mourning in other people's houses than they do on a normal day when they're happy in their own homes. So my cousin gives me this list that is about the amount of rations you would need to feed a small village. So I go to the store, and I give the guy the list. Now, when I grew up in India, I had nothing to my name. But I knew that I knew at that moment, even my mother would be proud because whatever that guy said the bill was, I probably had it in my wallet. And I was ready to pay, at least to honor my mother. And as I opened the wallet, thinking she would be proud of who I have become, because I didn't have to negotiate. I didn't have to say, oh, is the price of onion so much? Everything is just loaded in the car, and I'll give him cash. But as I opened the wallet, the storekeeper put his palm on my wallet and said, what are you doing? I said, I'm paying you. He said, sir, in this town, the name Dhanam is all the payment you need here. I haven't lived there for 40 years. That's my pop. Your parents have given you a good name. Honor them. I'm Anila's husband and Nick's dad. I'm going to come down here. If you have questions, just yell them out, and I'll try to answer a few. And then, if you disagreed with anything I said, slap the person next to you. I'll know you're upset, but that's your problem. But if you have a question, just stand up and yell it out. I'll try to make sure we hear, but maybe we can answer a few questions before I run. So, don't look at someone else here. Go ahead. I'll come to you next. Okay. Okay, the question is, why do you call your wife your bride? Because I've been on many boring anniversaries, yet to go on a boring honeymoon. No, here's the reason. My wife, bride, has been through a lot of illnesses over the years. Her body has been wreaked havoc with medicine and with disease. But I have learned to look at her through the eyes of a God who forgives. And I see a woman restored. Because I look at her through the eyes of my Lord, I can tell you without any fear of error, she is more beautiful to me today than she was on our wedding night. So that's why I call her my bride.
Hello.
Yeah.
Good morning. So I'm Uday Pratap Singh, a final year management student, and wanted to ask a question about management. Who's struggling with his professional and personal life, where he know that he want to go to abroad for studies, but he also know that he wanted to complete his dissertation by the end of this semester. So, what are your tips on this? That how can we basically manage a professional and personal life where we are really struggling with it?
The question of managing personal and professional, one thing is for sure, no matter what you do not do it as an attempt. Try to be victorious. I'll give you the illustration. Edmund Hillary climbed Mount Everest 1953. But he failed 5 times before that. He wrote about that in his book, High Adventure. After the 5th time of trying Everest, he was invited to a place which was celebrating him for being a guy who tried something great. So when you're in your final year, you're doing stuff and all of that stuff, you're probably better than many others who are not even there. So you may get some opportunities with that level of qualification. Okay? Edmund Hillary walks into a room like this, and there's a picture of Mount Everest, and they're celebrating him for almost conquering the world's greatest mountain. Edmund Hillary made a fist at that mountain and said, I'm going to get you. I'm going to get you because you have grown just about all you're going to grow. But I am still growing. And he summited Everest. So great was that monumental achievement that the last 28 feet is called the Hillary Step. He's one of the few people who is not a monarch of a country whose picture is on currency. He's on the $5 bill, $5 New Zealand bill. Now, that's not the end of the story. Edmund Hillary is now knighted by the Queen of England, comes to India as New Zealand's High Commissioner as Sir Edmund Hillary during my time, much before your time. He does an oceans to sky expedition with his son, Peter Hillary. They want to go backwards up the Ganges River. He's an adventurer. But halfway up, they had to abandon because the torrent of the Ganga was too mighty for them. And a reporter said, how does it feel to be tamed by the mighty Ganga? He said, I guess history will have to be happy with the fact that I conquered Everest. You can never take away a win. Make sure you complete something and not just compete at everything. All right? Yeah.
Good morning, sir. I'm Vaishnavi. So I have 2 questions. So the first one is, what is your idea of perseverance, and what keeps you going on every day? And the second question is, what are you currently reading? What are you currently reading?
What are you currently reading? Okay. The first question was on perseverance and what do I do to keep going every day? I get asked this a lot, Vaishnavi, and that is this. What keeps me going is email. I get a lot of email from around the world from young people like you who says thank you. If I just read on my phone some of the things I just got this week, it was easy to make another trip. Now I'm physically exhausted when I get on the plane. People say, what do you read? I don't read anything on the plane. I just watch movies. I do non-cerebral stuff. But currently, what am I reading? I'm reading, I just finished I mean, it's a huge, I'm doing it on Audible because reading it is, I couldn't find the text for it, but I found the Audible version. It's almost a 56-hour narration of a book. It's called Antiquities of the Jews by Flavius Josephus. Now, I read anthropology a lot to understand human behavior as to why certain groups of people at certain times, amidst great persecution, still overcame the odds. So I study stories of overcoming. I don't read a lot of fiction anymore, maybe a little bit of medical mysteries here and there. Robin Cook I'll read, but I don't have time for fiction. Because if I need fiction, I just watch Republic TV and Arnab in the evening, and you get your dose of fiction because that's, I mean, you know, that's Superman, you know. And he's also my antidote for insomnia. Anytime I really have a trouble sleeping, I just switch him on, and in 1 minute I'm out because I've never seen that much knowledge in one place. So I get scared, I just go to sleep. Apparently the nation wants to know, but I don't. So, all right. So I'm just kidding. But that's what I'm reading now. But at any given time, one of the things I'll give you as a gift, actually, because it'll be too many, I'll just send to the organizers a 7-page PDF that includes a lot of my one-liners, the sayings, my quotes, and all the things I quote, because I'm pretty sure none of you could write fast enough. I speak 300 words a minute with gusts up to 600, so you can't write as fast as I speak. But I'll send you that 7-page PDF, and then on the back last page is about 30 books that have changed my life. Then there's some websites on there. One of the websites I encourage all of you to be immersed in is a website called breakfastwithfred.com. Breakfastwithfred.com. Fred Smith was a leader's leader, and this is all the wisdom of his life maintained by Brenda. So if you go to that website and in the comment section, just tell Brenda, hey, Krish came to India, he mentioned your dad's website, and she'll call me and thank me, but we try to get her people watching the website from all over the world. But Fred Smith was the most brilliant person I ever met. In the end of his life, when he was 90 years old, going through dialysis twice a week, they would fly him to Palm Springs, California on a private jet, on a hospital bed with a nurse, and the people gathered around him would be the CEOs of McDonald's and Coca-Cola and Caterpillar, and they would ask questions for 2 days. And the last question always was, can we do this again next year? Brilliant, brilliant man. So breakfastwithfred.com. So I'll send that PDF, get it. Hopefully that'll help you. Who else had their hand up here? Go ahead. I'll come to you next, okay?
Good morning, sir. I'm Samriddhi. So you said that, don't let others criticize your will, but there are instances in your life which shakes you to the core. So how do we overcome? And there are many people who criticize you. So I am not in that position to divide people or to permit people who can criticize my will and who can criticize me personally. So how can I build that ability that you have?
Samriddhi. Samriddhi, that's a very, very profound observation. How? We know why we should do it, but how? The answer is not as complicated as it sounds, but when I give it to you, you'll say, I wonder why I didn't do it, or whoever it is. If somebody has criticized you in a room this size, I'm guessing, whatever, if there are 1,000 people here, odds are, and this is conservative, 25% of you, and I would put myself in your 25% because I've been there, 25% of you have either been doubted by, discounted by, abused by, abandoned by, mistreated by, or mistrusted by someone. You've had something profound or bad happen that shaped the trajectory. Someone said something, you can't do this, you never amount to anything. If you do this, you'll keep going up to jail, or all of those stuff that they tell us. My father would always say, you keep doing that, one day you'll end up in jail. And I do prison ministry now, and I've never seen anybody like me in jail. Just their fathers. No, I'm just kidding. So it's a, but what happens is, because they did that to you, let's say your age 20, let's say that happened at the age of 14, an uncle, someone betrayed you, someone you trusted, violated you, whatever it is. At the age of 14, you gave up hope once because you said, I'm probably no good, that's why they did this to me. At the age of 20 is when you're supposed to set goals for when you're 30. At the age of 20, you're still remembering 14. You never set any goals at 14. You arrive at 20, you're no closer to the future, you're just anchored in the past. The present is where you set goals for the future. So you'll arrive at 30 and you'll still be nowhere, still lamenting. So they messed you up once, but you become a victim 3 times and they're running around scot-free. First thing, write them a nasty note, a barn burner, and then burn it up. Don't send it. There is no amount of poison that can stay in one person that long without release. You will never forget what the world has done to you without forgiving what the people in this world have done to you. Now, if you need clinical help, I'm not a clinical counselor, but that's a definite step. I know a lot of people who have benefited by the fact that someone is there who is trained to listen. It is not a taboo to seek help for any mental struggle. The greatest taboo is, as a child of God, languishing in the filth of someone else's objectionable behavior. All right? Yeah.
Good morning, sir. My name is Ishika. Firstly, I want to thank you for being our motive or action for this hour. My question is, you have mentioned, you have emphasized on the word disposition. So I really want to ask, what is your definition of disposition?
There are two Yeah, I got it. Okay, there are 2 attributes to human behavior. One is character. Character is the ability to have pride in the mundane. The mundane is what you do every day. So a good, healthy character is having a healthy self-pride in the menial tasks of daily living. The second disposition of character is what you are when no one is looking. Disposition then is bringing the identity of who you are when no one is looking and continuing to do it with pride when everyone is looking. Okay? Make sense? All right. Back there. Are we doing on time, Father? Huh? 20 minutes? Okay.
Good morning, sir. My name is Prisha. You said that it's okay to fail and it's okay to fail big. So how do you come in terms with that kind of failure?
If you remember what I said I learned how to fail big. I didn't say it's okay to fail. I added by saying failure is an event. It has never been a person. You can fail at something, you cannot fail as someone. So when I talk about failure, I talk about something which is called failing forward. Here's the premise. Failure has never been fatal. Failure has never been futile. When Edison was asked about the brilliance of the incandescent light bulb, he said, I've just eliminated 10,000 ways that won't work. Edison cannot be considered a failure because he produced the bulb, but he failed 10,000 times at it. So that's failing forward. Failure is never fatal. I know people who, from the very depths of despair, wrote some of the great things that contributed to humanity and then passed away. Failure is not futile. For example, when Isaac Newton is asked the question about gravity, he considers him a failure in one sense of the way and not in the others. He says, I can tell you what gravity is, the method, and we have used his calculations to put advanced objects in outer space. He can tell you, he says, I can tell you how gravity works, formulaic. I can give you the method, I can give you the mechanism. But he says, I have failed to identify what gravity is. That I ascribe to a divine. So in his mind, failure is, I only gave you 2 out of 3. So failure is a broad term, and sometimes because we are in a shame culture, the reason we take failure as futile, as fatal, is because we live in a culture which is, we're determined by our deeds. Here's a case in point. When I came back from the US, and I was a proud person as a salesman, my father said, what do you do? I said, I'm a salesman. He said, don't say that. People will think you're selling, you're a medical rep. In those days, it was a bad deal to be a medical rep because a medical rep never had a territory, never had a home, had other wives in other cities, and that was definitely a bad thing. And I have an uncle, so I apparently have cousins who I'm not related to. But that's a whole different issue. But when I said I'm a salesman, my father said, don't say that. People will think you're a failure. Why would they think I'm a failure if I'm a salesman? I'm making more money than most of the people who are professional. His mind could not comprehend the fact that I had a salary that was only 10% guaranteed and 90% on commission, but I was hungry, and my 90% was outdoing everybody's dental benefit and mental benefit. I did not want a job. I wanted a career. And he says, well, at least make up a title. You know, you guys live in the north, so when I came north is the first time I heard this saying, log kya kahenge? कौन है ये लोग 40 साल से ढूंढ रहा हूं मिले ही नहीं वो खुद अपने लोग को ढूंढ रहा है nobody has time. So when I told my father, I said, what do you mean make something up? He says, this fellow, my friend, his son went to America. He is now a tactical automotive dispensation engineer. He dispatches cabs. Fuel allocation specialist. He pumps gas. बना सकते हैं title, क्या फर्क पड़ता है? I sat in a plane one time, I asked the guy, what do you do? Oh, I'm the East Coast director of West Coast products that are produced in the North for exclusive consumption in the South. You're a salesman. Quit making it up. But my dad thought I was a failure because of the title. Now, you asked me a question about bride earlier, someone asked. Since email came out, if you look at my email, you think I'm a failure. My email ID does not say president of one company, co-founder of another, managing partner of a third. Doesn't say author of 7 books. Doesn't say any of that. It says Anila's husband and Nick's dad. That's what my email ID says. Many people who are managing directors in their titles, whose companies will not let them put my title, will say, I'm a failure compared to you. I wish I could write that. That's all. Failure is an event. It has never been a person. You can fail at something. You cannot fail as someone. Failure is not fatal. It's not futile. And fail forward. So hopefully that gave you some clarification. Someone else? Who else? Okay, let's go here and then we'll go back there to her.
Okay, so sir, I'm Vahini. Firstly, I'm quite grateful to you that for this session, and you have been the one of the best motivational speaker I've ever heard. I'm quite grateful. I'm extremely grateful to you for this session today. So I just wanted to know that what was that one moment that you feel that will inspire people like this? You'll be that one motivational speaker that you'll pursue, as a career or whatever, or just your interest, or you as a person, because you say that you have been like that from very long time. You're good at English, speaking, everything. So what was that one point that you felt like that?
Well, first, I think I still have work to do because next time when I come, I hope you'll stand up and say, I was the best, not one of the best, because it means I'm still competing. So I don't know who the others are, but I need to find them and put a stop to it. That hurt my self-image. No, I'm kidding. What was the moment in my life when I heard Mr. Ziegler, January 26, 1990, I won a sales contest and went to his seminar. And for 3 hours, he spoke like I spoke to you. Not like some person who'd written 9 books, 25 books, and 9 were on the bestseller list. Not like someone commanding big fees. He talked to me like a grandfather would talk to a grandson. Because that day when I left the seminar, I turned right instead of turning left. This is before cell phones, so I got lost. I actually had to go to a payphone and call my wife, and she said, I'm going to print out the directions. In those days, you had to print out Yahoo directions, and she read them for me from the house and all this nonsense. I finally made it home. Some years later, we were in Australia, and I was with Mr. Ziegler in the business class lounge of Qantas in Sydney. And I told Mr. Ziegler the story. I said, Mr. Z, the first time I came to hear you, I got lost. He said, son, change that one thing about your interaction with me. That was the day you were found. There were 1,800 people in the audience that day, and everybody came in and went back left. Something happened that day that turned you around so completely that when you left, you lost direction. And that was the moment I realized that I wanted to be that kind of a communicator. Here's why. Today, we live in a high-tech world, and a message will travel around the world in 2 seconds and take an entire lifetime to go the last 6 inches between the head and the heart. Some speakers will tell you what you want to hear. Other speakers will tell you what you need to hear. I wanted to be the speaker that filled the gap between the head and the heart to tell you what you need to hear in a way you want to hear it. So. I'll come back to you guys. There was someone back here. Yeah, go ahead.
Good morning, sir. I'm Shreya from BCom ANA. So my question is how to build adaptability, because we came out of school into college with people with different cultures and different backgrounds, and we have a clashes of opinion, and we need to see those people every day. So how to deal with that?
Yeah, as one existential thinker said, hell is other people. So it just narrows down the lot. Well, you bring up a really good thing. When I came from the South, this was the days of the very colorful lungi. This is before she made lungi dance famous. This was actually our national dress. So I came from the South, and I was given a room with a Sardarji from Chandigarh. He's now in Canada. We've been dear friends for many years. So Nani and I were waiting because we did not want to adapt. He was just as strict as they come. He was raised in that agrarian household in a very, very prolifically wealthy agrarian family. He wanted his own room. Even though we had nothing, I had my own space. And so I was waiting. And then all the rooms were allocated, and they said, okay, Nanendra and Krishna, you share a room. Uh-oh. Now suddenly this guy from North India, who's like basically a warrior, everybody south of Bhopal for him is Madrasi. So that was not going to work. My Hindi was horrible at that time. I spoke that Hyderabadi Hindi, which my wife corrected, Kai ko tension lene ka baba. She said, agar bolna hai to saaf bolo, nahi to mat bolo. So anyhow, so I'm going to this room with this fellow. I'm wearing my lungi. I've got a cigarette in my mouth. I'm trying to be like, the South Indian film star. This guy walks in, and, this guy was the Navjot Singh Sidhu of those days. The pug match, everything was GQ. So he walks in. Abhe Kalu, kya kar rahe ho? That's a very, that was one of the nicest things he said to me in the time I got to know him. I said, what do you mean? We're roommates. First, lungi wangi to nahi chalega. Jaake pajama silwa ke aao. Where am I going to get a pajama, yaar? Abhi, I got a mattress and I walked all the way to Rajnagar. So then I had to go back to Delhi. Raat ko bus mein bhijwa de. He sent me back on a bus to Delhi. I had to get my aunt make me 2 pajamas and bring me back. Now, the reason I share that tongue-in-cheek is that was a culture clash. But what has evolved is a 40-year friendship. One thing he said was, I'm going to teach you some things that you don't know. And he taught me the importance of his pug. Every morning I had to hold it as he meticulously went through it. It was almost like my assignment that when I could not get ready before he got ready. One thing I learned in that was, as much as it started off as bullying, it taught me subservience out of dignity, respect for tradition, the ability to mingle and know. Now, I'll give you something interesting. That 40-year relationship has been so sweet over the years that whenever I used to speak, and now he's in Canada, but whenever I used to speak in Chandigarh, this fellow would stop everything and he would come to my event. And if I saw him at the back, I would stop the event and I would run to him and hug him. Because I never in my wildest dreams imagined in the South that my friend would be someone so different. Now, I share that as an example of what my own life happened. Now, how do you do this adaptability? One thing is this. I learned a book. There's a book called Kiss, Bow, or Shake Hands. I directed the international operations of a company. I've been to 75 countries. I've set up licenses in 25 of them. And so the book is called Kiss, Bow, or Shake Hands. It may be available in an online version now, but it had one page on every country. If you want adaptability, find out 5 things about every state in this country. Its origin, its revolution, its language, its primary heroes. What are its primary exports and principal imports? Maybe 5 if you want. But the first 4 will give you enough into the pride of the geographical origin of someone to allow them to say, hey, we're in the same side, looking in the same direction. That's the important part. Why we have adversity is people are standing across from each other trying to canvas their own greatness. Greatness never happens that way. It's when you stand next to each other and look in the same direction. So that's important. Second, I used to have a small clique of Telugu-speaking friends. So one day Nani came and he had a tin can and we were talking in Telugu. So he put some stones in the tin can and he sat down next to us and he started rattling it. I said, what are you doing, speaking Telugu? So it's like, so he says, that's what it sounds like, stop it. We're speaking English here. I'm not speaking Punjabi. Quit speaking in Telugu. Speak in English. Now, these are all things that today would be considered grave, racist, bigoted, prejudiced. We use words we can't spell. Because everybody's feelings get hurt about everything. Here's the principle. I shared it once, I'll share it again. If you want adaptability, remember this. 80% of the people in this world do not care you have a problem, wherever you're from. The other 20% are really happy it's you. That means 100% don't care. Just because you hold your breath, the universe doesn't suffocate. You'll perfect the ripples in your lives. The tsunamis will take care of themselves. Whatever is presented in front of you, integrate, don't irritate. When I went to America, same thing. People would say, oh, I used it positively. I landed in America, says, you Indians are so smart. And I said, man, that's the first time I was ever classified as smart. Before they could figure out I was the dumbest guy on the block, I'd already owned a company. Classic example, I'll give you a funny story. You got time for one story? Yeah, okay. Well, it's my time, so you have it. So we bought our first house. Anila was inside, so I'm mowing the yard. Now, in the US, you do everything yourself. My mother had a conniption when she came to the house and saw me washing the toilet when we had an apartment. She says, you came all the way to America to wash toilets. I said, no, this is my toilet. It's not like the neighbor's toilet I'm doing. She says, you don't have anybody to wash your toilet? I said, no, they're washing their own. This is how it works here. You don't have specific people running around washing other people's toilets. It's a different gig here. So I'm mowing my yard, and the neighbor, who's an American, he's from Hawaii, he looks and he says, how much do you charge? He thought the owners, because it's upper middle class play, we'd save money to buy in a nice area. So he says, how much do you charge? Now you can get all bent out of shape. What does this guy think you are? My uncle was in the army. Who cares? My father used to be the president's assistant. Who cares? If your father was president, tell me. It's like this one guy's father was constantly saying, when Abraham Lincoln was your age, he already did this. When he was your age, he already did this. And the son said, yeah, and he was your age, he was president. Be quiet. So, stop it. So I'm mowing the yard, and this guy says, how much? And here's my innocence. I have no clue how much to charge, but I am going to. I said, front and back? He said, yeah. I said, let's go check. So I walked to his yard and I said, 40? He said, that seems a little high. I said, for both. He says, 35? I said, sure. So he says, when do you mow it? I said, when I do that yard, I'll do it the same day. He said, which day do you do that yard? I said, whichever day I'm free, I own it. It's like tongue hit the floor. Now he realizes he's going to be my neighbor. He looks at me and he says, man, I don't even know where to begin. I said, don't worry, I'm going to get a lot of mileage using this in a seminar. That's what I do for a living. I won't put it in a book, I'll spare you that grief. Now, that's just the way I'm wired. But I was that way from a child. and maybe it came easy. But the reason I'm teaching it is it's not an alien principle. It's so easy to do. So easy to do. People say, how are you doing? Say, I'm doing incredible, but I think I'm improving. They'll look at you and think you're on drugs. But they'll walk away, which is the desired outcome. At least they won't dump on you. I don't want to win. I want to break even in every negotiation. So adaptability is just that. It's your willingness to know more about the other person than they know more about themselves and elevate them from their point of view, not from your point of view. All right? One last question.
Good morning, sir. Very good morning, sir. This is Pallavi Chattopadhyay. I'm a first year MA English student. I first and foremost want to commend you on your jokes and one-liners. I'm a big fan. Honestly, I have laughed holding my stomach throughout this seminar, and there was not one moment wherein I felt dull or bored. So that's amazing, sir. Can we have a huge round of applause on this? So, sir, as you mentioned earlier, that your bad days are a little better than ours, gradually or, generally. So, I just want to know what is that process you hold on to or that you have instilled in yourself that makes you have the bad days with a better taste, if that sounds correct.
Thanks a lot for that, for the compliment and your kind consideration. And I'm glad you laughed. There's some new scientific evidence that has come out recently that if you have a tendency to laugh and you suppress the laughter, it'll come back inside and make you fat. So let it out. Otherwise, it could be expensive on the wardrobe. So I'm glad you're laughing. All right? They say laughter is the best medicine. If you laugh for no reason, you probably need medicine. But that's a whole different issue. So one of the things I have learned to do, you said Pallavi? Okay, well, one of the things I have learned to do is to the best of my ability, I don't switch on the television when I'm away from Anila. Typically, the only time I watch TV is when we binge watch anything that she saves the shows and we watch together. Not because of that reason, but I'm pretty much on my iPad doing something. I'm not on any social media except LinkedIn. And in LinkedIn, most of the times, the questions I get are always advice. So invariably, even when I'm down, I have made a commitment to have a 24-hour, maximum 48-hour response window, and I respond to all my own emails. And as a result of that, I'm fairly busy in airports and all that, responding to stuff as it's happening, because I don't want it to get away. And it ends up being exactly my advice, because what I'm doing is I'm lifting someone else up and lifting myself up in the process. So that's the one thing I would encourage you to do. Second principle that helps is every day, at some point, instill in yourself the discipline to put into your mind that which is good, clean, pure, powerful, and positive. And I'll end with this. If life were a bank and the only currency of exchange was vision, most people are afraid that they would get a check returned saying lack of sufficient funds. The reason is, Shad Helmstetter said, you cannot go from a negative thinking person to a positive thinking person without changing the input from negative to positive. Unless you put into your mind good, clean, pure, powerful, and positive thoughts over a period of time, when confronted with weakness, when accosted with doubt, when suddenly face to face with adversity, you can draw into your memory bank and say, that day I thought of this, or that day I did this, or that day I read this. So you have to have in your arsenal those arrows that you can pull out to fight the demons in your own life, not just other people, all right? And I'm going to end with this saying that gives my love back to you. Folks, I've literally traveled this whole world and the 7 seas. I've been on my highs, and many a night I've wept on my knees. But of all the groups I've spoken to, the most honor I felt is my time with you. I'm Anila's husband and Nick's dad. God bless.